The full moon hung low in the Montana sky as Dr. James Chen finished cleaning his small laboratory. At 35, he had grown used to the quiet nights in his countryside home, far from the city lights that had once filled his life. His dark hair fell over his eyes as he looked through his microscope one last time, making sure everything was in order before heading to bed. A sudden blue flash lit up his backyard, bright enough to illuminate his entire lab through the windows. James jumped, knocking over an empty beaker that shattered on the floor. His heart raced as he rushed to the window, expecting to see lightning, but what he saw made him freeze in place. A ship, no bigger than a small car, hovered silently over his lawn. It looked like crystal, catching and reflecting the moonlight in ways that reminded him of soap bubbles. As he watched, it settled gently on the grass, barely disturbing the dandelions that grew wild around his property. "This can't be real," James whispered to himself, reaching for his phone to record what was happening. His hand shook so much he dropped it twice before managing to hit the record button. The crystal ship's surface rippled like water, and a section of it melted away to form a doorway. James held his breath. All those years of research, all those rejected papers about possible alien biology, and now something was literally landing in his backyard. What stepped out of the ship made him question if he had fallen asleep at his desk again. It wasn't the gray alien from movies or the terrifying creatures from horror films. Instead, a woman emerged, if you could call her that. She stood as tall as a human, but her skin shimmered with colors that reminded James of mother of pearl. Her hair flowed like liquid silver in the moonlight, moving as if it was underwater even though there was no wind. The alien woman, there was no other way to describe her, held something that looked like a tablet in her hands. She looked around, her eyes glowing softly in the dark, until she spotted James watching from his window. Instead of attacking or running away, she smiled and waved. James didn't know whether to wave back, run, or call someone. But who would he call? The police? The military? His old professor who had laughed at his theories about alien biology? Before he could decide, the alien visitor walked towards his lab door with confident steps. In the light from his windows, he could see that her clothes seemed to be made from the same crystal-like material as her ship, flowing around her like water but solid enough to keep their shape. His security system beeped as she approached the door. James took a deep breath and made a decision. He was a scientist after all. This was the moment he had been preparing for his entire career, even if nobody else had believed him. He opened the door. The alien woman held up her tablet, which displayed something that made James's jaw drop. It was his own research paper, the one that every scientific journal had rejected. The one about theoretical alien biology and the possibility of crystalline-based life forms. "Dr. James Chen," she said in perfect English, though her voice had a musical quality to it that no human voice could match. "My name is Lyra. I believe we have much to discuss about your research." James gripped the doorframe to steady himself. Of all the ways he had imagined first contact happening, he had never expected an alien to show up at his door quoting his unpublished work. "Would you like to come in?" he managed to say, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "I have tea." Lyra's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Tea would be wonderful. But first, I must tell you why I'm here. Your research, it's not just theoretical anymore. You've accidentally discovered something that could save my entire species." As James stepped aside to let her enter his lab, he couldn't help but think that his life was about to change forever. He just didn't know how much. James's hand shook as he poured hot water into 2 cups. The alien visitor, Lyra, sat at his small kitchen table, her iridescent skin casting rainbow patterns on the white walls. She held her tablet carefully, scrolling through what looked like complex DNA patterns. "Sugar?" he asked, trying to act normal, as if having an alien in his kitchen was an everyday occurrence. "No, thank you," Lyra said, looking up with her luminous eyes. "Dr. Chen, do you know why your research caught our attention?" James set the cups down and sat across from her. I assumed it was because I theorized about crystalline-based life forms like yourself. Lyra's silver hair rippled with what seemed like amusement. That was part of it. But there's more. She turned her tablet to face him. Look at this. On the screen, two DNA structures floated side by side. One was clearly human DNA, with its familiar double helix. The other was similar, but had a crystalline structure woven through it, making it shimmer like Lyra's skin. The left is human DNA, she explained in her musical voice. The right is mine. Your paper didn't just describe our biology. It predicted how our genetic structure could interact with human DNA. James leaned forward, his scientific mind racing. Interact? You mean human and crystalline DNA could be compatible? More than compatible, Lyra said, her expression growing serious. It could be our salvation. My people are dying, Dr. Chen. Please call me James, he said automatically, then processed what she'd said. Dying? How? Lyra's hair dulled slightly, showing what James guessed was sadness. We're too perfect, she said with a bitter smile. Over thousands of years, we engineered our genetics to achieve what we thought was perfection. But we went too far. She touched her tablet, and new images appeared. Medical scans showing crystalline beings like her, but with fracture patterns running through their bodies. Our genetic pool has become too uniform, she continued. We're losing our ability to adapt to new diseases, new environments. Each generation is more fragile than the last. But then we found your paper. James ran his hand through his messy hair, trying to understand. My theory about genetic diversity in spacefaring species, the one everyone said was impossible. Yes, Lyra said, reaching across the table. Her hand touched his, feeling cool and smooth like polished stone. You theorized that any advanced species would need to maintain genetic diversity to survive long-term space travel. You were right. And you went further. You proposed a method for combining different types of DNA to increase adaptability. James remembered writing that part at 3 in the morning, running on coffee and desperate hope. But that was just a theory. I never thought. It works, Lyra interrupted. We've run simulations. Human DNA contains patterns of adaptation and survival that we lost long ago. Your species can survive in almost any environment, fight off countless diseases, heal from incredible injuries. We need that strength. So you want to study human DNA? James asked, his scientific curiosity fully engaged now. Lyra shook her head, her hair catching the kitchen light like fiber optics. No, James, we want your help to save us. Your understanding of both human genetics and theoretical alien biology makes you unique in the entire galaxy. You saw what none of us could, a way to combine our strengths. She stood up, her crystalline clothes chiming softly. Will you help us? It would mean working in secret. Earth isn't ready for open contact. But you could save an entire civilization. James looked at his small lab through the kitchen door, then back at the alien who had traveled across space because of his rejected theories. His life's work hadn't been crazy after all. It had been more important than he could have imagined. When do we start? He asked. Lyra's smile lit up the room literally, her skin glowing with joy. We already have. That tea you're drinking, it's scanning your DNA right now. James stared at his teacup in shock. You've been scanning my DNA? Without asking. Lyra's face showed what looked like embarrassment, her skin's glow dimming slightly. I apologize. On my world, sharing genetic information is as normal as sharing your name. I forgot Earth's customs are different. Before James could respond, his computer beeped. The screen lit up with streams of data, his DNA analysis from the T-scan. Even from across the room, he could see it was unlike anything he'd ever studied. Come look, Lyra said, walking to the computer. Your DNA is fascinating. Despite his irritation about the surprise scan, James's scientific curiosity won out. He joined her at the screen, watching as his genetic code was mapped in incredible detail. See these sequences. Lyra pointed to a section of DNA. They show how humans adapt to high-stress situations. And these, she moved her crystalline finger to another part, show your immune system's flexibility. It's beautiful. James watched her face as she studied the screen. Her silver hair flowed with excitement, and her eyes glowed brighter when she found something interesting. He realized she looked at his DNA the way he looked at breakthrough research, with pure joy of discovery. "So what do we do next?" he asked, forgetting to be angry about the scan. Lyra turned to him with a serious expression. "We need to start combining DNA samples. But it's dangerous. If we make a mistake, it could hurt both our species." She pulled out her tablet and placed it next to his computer. A hologram appeared above it, showing a 3D model of DNA strands twisting together. "This is what happens when we try to combine our DNA normally," she explained. The hologram showed the strands shattering. "Our crystalline structure breaks down your organic material." James leaned closer to the hologram. "But what if we—" He reached into the light, moving his fingers through it to adjust the model. "What if we add a buffer layer, something that can handle both structures?" Lyra's hair rippled with excitement. "Yes, that's exactly what your paper suggested. But we need to find the right buffer." They worked through the night, testing different combinations in Lyra's advanced simulation system. James forgot about time, forgot about how strange it was to work with an alien. This was pure science, the kind he dreamed of doing his whole life. At sunrise, they had their first breakthrough. "Look," James pointed at the screen. "The enzyme from human stem cells. It's not breaking down when it touches your crystalline structure." Lyra moved so quickly she seemed to float. "And my people's repair proteins are accepting it." "James, this is incredible." Without thinking, she hugged him. Her crystalline body felt cool against his skin, but not uncomfortable. They both froze, suddenly aware of how close they were. Lyra stepped back quickly, her skin shifting through rainbow colors in what James guessed was embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I got excited." "It's okay," James said, trying to sound professional. It was a big breakthrough. But something had changed in the lab's atmosphere. The excitement of scientific discovery had mixed with something else, something neither of them had expected. Lyra turned back to the computer, her voice slightly musical with emotion. "We should run more tests. My people will want to see multiple successful trials." "Right," James agreed, focusing on the data. "We should probably test different types of human DNA too. I'm just one sample." As they went back to work, both pretended not to notice how their hands sometimes touched when they reached for the same key, or how they stood closer than necessary while looking at test results. Science was supposed to be objective, James thought, but he was starting to realize that saving an alien species might be more complicated than he'd expected. The second crystal ship arrived 3 days after James and Lyra's breakthrough. Unlike Lyra's elegant vessel, this one was angular and dark, landing in James's backyard with a harsh hum that made the windows vibrate. James was looking through his microscope when he heard the sound. "Lyra, are you expecting anyone?" Lyra's skin paled to an almost transparent state, a sign James had learned meant fear. "No. That's a security division ship. They weren't supposed to know I was here." Before James could ask more questions, 3 figures emerged from the new ship. They looked similar to Lyra, but their crystalline forms were sharp-edged, their hair moving like shards of glass rather than flowing silver. "Get your research data," Lyra said quickly. "Hide it somewhere safe." James grabbed his laptop and the special drive Lyra had given him, shoving them into a hidden compartment under his lab floor, something he'd installed years ago when his paranoia about government agents had seemed silly. The lab door opened without anyone touching it. The 3 crystal beings entered, their movements stiff and precise. "Research monitor Lyra," the tallest one said, its voice like grinding glass. "You have violated protocol. Direct contact with primitive species is forbidden." "Commander Vale." Lyra stood straight, her voice steady despite her pale color. "My mission was approved by the Science Council. The council is soft, Vale's sharp features twisted. We've been monitoring your transmissions. You're attempting genetic fusion with these primitives. He looked at James like he was an interesting bacteria. James stepped forward. Our research shows promising results for solving your genetic crisis. If you'd like to review the data. Silence. Vale cut him off. You don't understand what's at stake. Our civilization needs immediate solutions, not careful experiments. The other two crystal beings moved to Lyra's computer, their fingers extending into sharp data probes. What are you doing? Lyra demanded. Collecting samples, Vale said coldly. The security division has decided on a more efficient approach. Why waste time with experiments when we can harvest genetic material directly? Earth has billions of test subjects. James felt cold fear in his stomach. You're talking about kidnapping humans for experiments. They're primitives, Vale said dismissively. They kill each other over land and imaginary lines on maps. We would be doing them a favor, advancing their species. That's not true, James said, anger replacing his fear. Humans are more than that. We adapt, we grow, we help each other. Look at your own research. You need us because we stayed diverse. We didn't try to force everyone to be perfect. Vale moved faster than James could see, suddenly right in front of him. Careful, primitive. You're only alive because we need samples. Stop. Lyra moved between them. The Science Council won't allow this. The Council doesn't know we're here. Vale smiled, his teeth looking like small crystals. And now we have two choices for you. Research monitor. Help us collect samples efficiently, or be marked as a traitor who went native. James looked around his lab. At the research that could save Lyra's people, at the alien who had trusted him, at the three invaders who saw humans as lab rats. He needed to think fast. His hand found the old fire alarm behind his back. The same alarm connected to the sprinkler system he'd modified years ago for emergency decontamination. You forgot something about us primitives, James said, meeting Vale's crystal eyes. We're really good at surviving. He pulled the alarm. The sprinklers activated, but instead of water, they sprayed a chemical cleaning solution James used for his equipment. The sharp-edged aliens screamed as the liquid clouded their crystalline forms. Run. James grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward the door. They had only seconds before Vale and his team recovered. As they ran into the night, James realized their peaceful research project had just turned into something much more dangerous. James drove his old truck down dark country roads, while Lyra sat beside him, her crystalline form dimmed to almost invisible. They had been driving for 2 hours, taking back roads to avoid any possible pursuit. They'll track your ship, James said, checking his mirrors for the 100th time. We need to get far away from my house. No, Lyra's voice was quiet. They can't track my ship because it's not really there anymore. It dissolved when I decided to stay on Earth. James almost drove off the road. What? Why would it dissolve? Lyra's hair moved restlessly, showing her nervousness. Because I knew I wouldn't need it again. I knew I would stay here, with you. He pulled the truck over at an abandoned gas station, turning to face her. How could you know that? We just met a few days ago. In the dim light of the moon, Lyra's skin rippled with colors that James had never seen before. There's something I haven't told you about my people. Something important. She touched her temple, and a soft light projected from her eyes, creating a hologram between them. It showed James in his lab, but in scenes that hadn't happened yet, working with complex equipment, teaching other crystal beings, standing proudly as two species worked together. We can see pieces of the future, Lyra explained. Not clearly, not always correctly, but we see possibilities. I saw you months ago. In my future memories, I saw you helping us, changing us, saving us. James watched the images with wide eyes. That's why you chose me. Because of a vision. No, Lyra's voice became stronger. I chose to come here because your research was brilliant. The visions just told me it was the right choice. But she hesitated. But what? They also showed me something else. Something I try to ignore. The hologram change, showing James and Lyra together. Their hands touching, their forms somehow merged in a way that seemed both impossible and natural. James's heart beat faster. Is that why Vale said you went native? My people think emotions make us weak, Lyra said. They think love is a primitive thing that we evolved past. But they're wrong. Our perfect, emotionless society is dying, while humans, with all their feelings and chaos and love, grow stronger. She reached out, her crystalline hand touching his human one. Where they touched, a soft glow appeared. The genetic fusion we discovered, James said slowly. You knew it would work because you saw it in the future. I saw the possibility, Lyra corrected. But science still needed to make it happen. Your brilliant mind made it real. The visions just gave me hope. Suddenly, her skin flashed bright. They're coming. Vale's ship just passed over us. James started the truck. We need help, and I think I know where to get it. Where? Remember how Vale said humans fight over imaginary lines on maps? James smiled grimly. Well, those lines mean we have different governments. And some of those governments would be very interested in keeping alien invaders from kidnapping their citizens. You want to expose us? Lyra's hair moved in surprise. Not all of you. Just Vale and his plans. My old college roommate works for the government now. He's laughed at my alien theories for years, but he's also the most honest person I know. With your future-seeing ability and my evidence, we might be able to convince him. Lyra's form brightened slightly. In some of my visions, humans and my people work together openly. Perhaps this crisis is how it begins. James took her hand again, watching the glow between their touching skin. I guess we're about to make some new future memories. He turned the truck toward Washington, D.C., hoping his old friend would believe the craziest story ever told, and help them save both their species from Vale's cruel plans. The security guard at the Washington, D.C. government building stared at James's old university ID card for a long time. You're saying Dr. Michael Thompson is expecting you? At 3 a.m.? It's an emergency, James said, trying to look confident despite his wrinkled clothes and messy hair. Beside him, Lyra stood completely still, wearing a large coat and sunglasses to hide her crystalline appearance. The guard picked up his phone, and James held his breath. Everything depended on his old friend being willing to listen. 10 minutes later, they sat in Mike Thompson's office. Mike looked exactly like James remembered, tall, serious, and always dressed in a perfect suit even in the middle of the night. James Chen, Mike shook his head. Still chasing aliens after all these years. Actually, James looked at Lyra. The aliens found me. Lyra removed her sunglasses and coat. Mike's coffee cup crashed to the floor as her crystalline form caught the office lights, sending rainbow patterns across the walls. Oh my God, Mike whispered. You weren't crazy all those times. Before he could finish, the building's lights went red. Alarms blared. They found us. Lyra's skin paled. Vale's team is here. Mike grabbed his phone. This is Director Thompson. We have a code black in the main building. I repeat. The phone died in his hand. All the lights went out except for the red emergency ones. They've cut power to the building, Lyra said. They'll try to take us quietly. Avoid witnesses. Mike pulled a gun from his desk. This is a secure government facility. Nobody's taking anyone. James grabbed his arm. Normal weapons won't work on them, but I have an idea. He looked around the office. Do you still keep emergency supplies in your desk, like when we were in college? Mike nodded, pulling open a drawer. Inside was a familiar sight, bottles of cola and bags of mint candies. Perfect. James grabbed them. Lyra, can their forms handle rapid temperature changes? No, her eyes widened. That's why the cleaning solution hurt them. Sudden chemical reactions disrupt their crystalline structure. James finished. He started opening cola bottles and dropping in mints. Mike, get your security team ready. When these explode, Vale's team will be vulnerable for a few seconds. Mike stared at him. You're going to fight alien invaders with soda bombs. They think humans are primitive, James said, setting up the bottles near the door. Let's show them why being primitive can be an advantage. They heard crystal footsteps in the hallway. Lyra's hair moved like lightning. They're here. Get ready, James whispered. The office door shattered. Vale and his team entered, their sharp forms glowing with power. Primitives, Vale sneered. Did you think you could hide in this simple building? No, James smiled. We were counting on you finding us. He kicked the first bottle. The chemical reaction was instant. Cola and mint exploded in a foam fountain, spraying the crystal beings. As their forms started to crack from the sudden temperature change, Mike shouted into his radio. Now, security teams burst in from both sides of the hallway, throwing nets over the disoriented aliens. The nets sparked with electricity. Mike had understood James's plan perfectly. Vale screamed in rage as his crystalline form flickered and weakened. You'll doom both our species. No, Lyra stepped forward, her voice strong. We're saving them. The Council will learn how you tried to destroy our best hope for survival. As security teams secured Vale's group, Mike turned to James. I'm going to need a very good explanation for my superiors. James watched as Lyra helped explain to the security teams how to safely contain the crystal beings. Actually, I think we're going to need the President's help, because saving humanity might mean working with aliens, just not the ones who think we're primitive. Mike sighed, looking at his ruined office. At least now I know why you always carried cola and mints in college. Actually, James grinned. Back then, it was just because I liked the explosions. 1 week after capturing Vale, James stood nervously in the White House meeting room. The president sat at one end of the long table, while various military and science advisors filled the other seats. Lyra stood beside James, her crystalline form now displayed proudly. Let me get this straight, the president said, looking at the files in front of her. You're saying there's an entire alien civilization that needs our help? Yes, Madam President, James replied. Their genetic engineering went too far. They're dying because they tried to be too perfect. Mike, now appointed as chief liaison for alien relations, added, We've confirmed their story. Vale's ship contained files about their civilization's decline. Lyra stepped forward, her movement causing light patterns to dance on the walls. My people live in cities made of crystal, spread across 3 star systems. We thought we were making ourselves better, removing what we saw as flaws. But we were wrong. She touched her tablet, projecting images of her world. The advisors gasped at cities that looked like they were made of diamonds, ships that sailed through space like flying gems, and crystal beings going about their daily lives. Beautiful, the president said, but dying. Yes, Lyra's hair moved sadly. Each generation is weaker than the last. But humans, she smiled at James, humans are everything we're not. Adaptable, diverse, strong. James pulled up their research data. We found a way to combine our DNA structures, not to change either species, but to help Lyra's people regain what they lost, the ability to adapt and grow. And what does Earth get from this? One of the military advisors asked. Knowledge, Lyra answered. Our science, our technology, our understanding of the universe. We've traveled between stars for thousands of years. We can help humanity reach them too. The president stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Washington Monument. There are over 7 billion humans on Earth. How do we know everyone will accept aliens living among us? James stepped forward. Madam President, humans have always been afraid of differences, but we've also always learned to overcome that fear. That's what makes us special. We can change, adapt, grow. It's exactly why Lyra's people need us. And the security division? Mike asked. What about Vale and his supporters? The council has removed them from power, Lyra said. Vale's plans to kidnap humans proved what we've forgotten. That forcing change never works. We need to learn from humanity's diversity, not try to control it. The president returned to her seat. Dr. Chen, you discovered all this because everyone else said your theories were impossible. What do you think we should do? James looked at Lyra, then at all the serious faces around the table. I think we should do what humans have always done. Take a chance on something new. Help others while helping ourselves grow. He touched Lyra's hand, letting everyone see the soft glow where crystal met human skin. Look at this. Two completely different forms of life, working together. If that's not proof that anything's possible, I don't know what is. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then the president smiled. Dr. Chen, how would you like to head a new department? We'll call it the Bureau of Interspecies Relations. Me? James blinked in surprise. Who better? The president asked. You're the only human who's already proven they can work with our new allies. Besides, she grinned, I think you've earned it after being called crazy all these years. As the meeting room filled with discussion about next steps, treaties, and cooperation plans, Lyra leaned close to James. Just like in my vision, she whispered. Though I never saw the part about you becoming a bureau chief. James squeezed her crystal hand. Maybe some futures are too good even for your visions to predict. The future of two species was changing, and it all started because one human refused to believe the impossible couldn't happen. 1 year later, James stood in his new laboratory at the Bureau of Interspecies Relations. The facility was much bigger than his old home lab, filled with both human and crystal technology. Through the large windows, he could see the Montana mountains he loved, but now with several crystal ships parked nearby. Dr. Chen, his assistant Sarah, poked her head in. The first group of exchange students is here. James smiled. After months of preparation, the cultural exchange program was finally starting. He walked to the main hall where 20 crystal beings and 20 humans waited nervously. Lyra was already there, her silver hair flowing as she talked to the group. She now wore the official badge of Earth Crystal Ambassador, though James thought she looked just as beautiful as the night she first landed in his yard. Welcome to the first Earth Crystal Exchange Program, James addressed the group. You're making history today. A young crystal being raised her hand. Dr. Chen, is it true you discovered how to save our people using human DNA? Actually, James smiled. Humans and crystal beings saved each other. We just had to learn to work together. He activated the wall screen, showing images from the past year, the first successful DNA fusion treatment that helped crystal children adapt better to changes. Human scientists learning to use crystal technology. Crystal beings teaching humans about space travel. Your assignment for the next 6 months is simple. Lyra took over. Humans will learn about crystal culture, and crystal beings will learn about human life. Not just the science, but everything. Food, music, families, feelings. Speaking of feelings, Sarah whispered to James, pointing at 2 students, a human girl and a crystal boy who were already talking excitedly about something, their hands creating that now familiar glow where they touched. James remembered his old research papers that everyone had rejected. Now they were required reading at universities on both worlds. Life finds a way, he muttered to himself. Later that evening, James and Lyra stood on the facility's roof, watching the sunset paint the crystal ships in beautiful colors. Vale's supporters are still causing trouble in the outer colonies, Lyra said. They say we're weakening our species by mixing with humans. Are we? James asked, taking her hand. Or are we all growing stronger together? Lyra's hair rippled with happiness. The latest medical reports show crystal children born after the DNA treatment are healthier than any in the last 1,000 years. And they're developing something new. Emotions like humans have. Is that why you look so happy? James teased. Or is there something else? Lyra's skin shifted through rainbow colors, her version of a blush. My latest vision. I saw a child. Not human, not crystal, but both. Something new. James's heart skipped. You mean? The DNA fusion we created. It works better than anyone expected. In a few years, it might be possible for humans and crystal beings to have children together. James pulled her close, watching the glow between them grow brighter. I guess being primitive isn't so bad after all. You were never primitive. Lyra touched his face. You were exactly what we needed. What I needed, someone who could see the impossible and make it real. Below them, they could hear the exchange students laughing and talking. Two species learning from each other, growing together, creating a future neither could have imagined alone. Ready to go home? James asked, looking at their house near the facility where crystal and human furniture sat side by side. I am home, Lyra answered. Wherever you are, that's my home now. As they walked inside, James thought about how much had changed in 1 year. He'd gone from being the crazy alien researcher to helping save two species. But more importantly, he'd learned that sometimes the craziest ideas turn out to be the most important ones. And sometimes, the most beautiful things in the universe happen when different worlds come together.